What's new, 802? I'm Becca Hammond, and you're listening to Vermont Talks. Vermont Talks may include graphic or explicit content. Listener discretion is advised. On this week's episode, we have Holly Painter. Holly Painter is a published poet, an author, and a lecturer at UVM. Holly's works include My Pet Sounds Off, translating the Beach Boys, excerpts from A Natural History, At Last We Listen Closely, cryptic crossword puzzles, The Pressure of All That Light, and The Obsolete Jobs Project, which she's still working on now. Let's get to it.
This first poem is called Assembly. Who knows how to do a push-up? I need volunteers. Jumping Jack jogs around the stage as he talks. An orange sweatband restrains frizzy curls as a matching stopwatch bounces on his chest. Exercise is his thing. At 7, I'm all kid muscle, rangy and wound up. I love Little League. I love pickup soccer. I love the presidential physical fitness test badges my mom's sewn onto my jean jacket. I love these assemblies. Neil and I grin at each other as we climb the steps. Now, boys' bodies and girls' bodies are a little bit different, aren't they? Penis! Comes a shout from the back. Jumping Jack misses a jog. My teacher hisses, deploying cross eyebrows and a warning finger. For boys' bodies, this is the right kind of push-up. Jumping Jack drops to the stage and performs a basic push-up, the kind we do in gym class. Neil and I scramble into position, poised to dip, but Jumping Jack catches my arm and pulls me up. But girls have less upper body strength, so put your knees on the floor instead. He demonstrates a clearly wimpier push-up. Neil is pumping up and down, eyes on the floor. No! I shout, as Jumping Jack poses my limbs. He flinches. The room goes quiet. My eyes burn. I don't need a girl way. I can do it right. The principal takes my hand and walks me off stage. Jumping Jack gets another volunteer. Alright, so the next poem is called Field Trip. Bus windows stutter open. Calves and thighs adhere to gray institutional vinyl. Squeals bounce. Dawson's Creek and Jay-Z, and who's asked which U of D boy to prom. Our teacher stands, grabs hold of a seat as we lurch through the parking lot. Girls, quiet down! That lasts 2 minutes. My plaid-skirted classmates are back into Gilmore Girls, AP Bio, field hockey. Beside me, my best friend. I haven't slept well since we met a year ago. My math notebook curls with letters I can't give her, and my wallet holds as treasure the one she wrote me. Mundane, but signed, Love. As all these girls sign notes. Link arms in the halls, hang photos of friends in lockers, braid hair in class. So casual in their intimacies, while I cry in the library at lunch, headphones on. Oh, you're too afraid to touch, too afraid you'll like it too much. My crush, my love, my all-consuming shame and hunger, for whom I regularly lie and make excuses, whom I enable and save and spend quarter after quarter talking down from payphones all around town. Ask me what I'm reading. In my lap, a library book. Slaughterhouse-Five. She smiles. So it goes. My chest clenches. I turn my pages, try to breathe normally, not be aware of her clinking rings, her laundry soap that's different from mine, her bare, banged-up knees tucked neatly under the seat, smoothness grazing my legs at every thumping turn. Billy was helped to his feet by the lovely boy, by the heavenly androgen. I read the sentence 3 times before nudging her. Do you know what this word means? Androgen. Androgen. She smiles again, too slowly, finds my eyes and holds my gaze too long. Yeah, it's like you. Not quite a boy or a girl, or hard to tell. 2 girls belt out Britney Spears. Someone chews watermelon bubblegum. The bus rumbles onto I-75. The wind blows my first love's hair across her face, and I have flaming cheeks and a word for myself. The next poem is called To San Francisco with Paul. We abandon our vertical sea salt Legoland in a honking, steaming, close-cuddling procession of backlit raindrops, trickling down too few finite rivulets. Foot breakbound, I jabber. Paul nods, flits to another station, trains his camera to the top of the Aeon Center. Zoom, scan, pull back, looking for jumpers. None today, but he keeps skimming. U.S. Bank, Wells Fargo. No, it's 2003, and everyone's happy. We lose our tag-along convoy within the hour, and then there's just space, and we can't figure out why LA is so crowded, when here to San Francisco is just truck stops and oil derricks nodding, and those crisp white wind turbines they thought would ruin the view, but the view's just mountain crusts growing mold, and creosote bushes stranded all across the flat like props from an earnest western. We're 3 weeks Californian and already possessive of our peeling paper trees, our envios de dinero signs, our inland seagulls nibbling strip mall trash. 3 weeks friends and already possessive of the other secret, packed tight and melancholy as the cows, scented miles away. Now we've said it, it's true, and we're going to San Francisco. In this state of strangers, there's no one to mind. When the gutterball sun lands between rows of pistachio trees, we can only tell hills from sky because they're so much blacker and firmer than backcountry firmament, with its pores to ease out the pressure of all that light. We'll arrive late to a scene that's all sparkle, hills and sky reverse. We'll find no underage bars in the Castro, so we'll eat Ben & Jerry's and watch our people and wonder what people will be. But that's hours from now. We pull off for gas station tacos and sit in the forecourt, dripping salsa and beans on our dusty flip-flops. We have no people yet, Paul and me, just each other and the hope that there's no God to mind. The next poem is called The Tragedy of Space Opera. We want to break alien hearts and know that our prospects are infinite. We want to be cosmic nomads, smugglers, hitchhikers, stowaways, 20,000 clicks from home. We want to jet between planets, like generations of comic book heroes. We want to wear glass bobbleheads and bright spandex, and bounce around, timing our trysts to the shadows of rings. We want to colonize luminous worlds with binary stars twirling above. We want to settle down, terraform new Earths where nothing's ever lived before. We want to holiday beside methane seas, barter with moon rocks and satellite parts. We want Vulcan accountants, Cylon spin instructors, the worlds after the wars. We want to die in space. Did you know that no one has ever really floated away and run out of air, screaming, as they watch the spaceship become a pinprick? We dream of it at night and wake up wet and die instead of too many burgers and smashing our cars together. This poem is called Her Blue Moons. She comes at last after months of drought, of shepherd boys drinking the dew of the fields, of zebras sharing the watering holes of lions. She comes at last with the rains from the north, flash floods, urchins who take to treetops like kites, delicate monkeys who can neither swim nor drown. She comes at last in the chill of an antique moon, sallow, china blue hairline fractures around the eyes, and wrestles a pocket button for the last dry cigarette. Her fingers scissor between mine, the dance she drags from our feet, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3s us past the glow of whitewashed warehouses, across the bridge where children watch cars burn time-lapse streaks in the alleys, beyond the sagging tents of an autumn fairground where silhouettes of stiltmen gather fog in the clearing, past the dairy and the post shop to a student flat, 3 flatties, a wood stove, and David Attenborough on the television telling us we're missing almost everything. This one is called Boys on the Beach. It is set in New Zealand, so there are some New Zealand-specific flora and fauna. Boys on the Beach. 5 hours in a gutless summer wonder, like a boys' brigade bus parading us north, as we bitch about the sticky black leatherback seat, treacle-thick heat, lazy fly fizzing, concussing on the glass. Herds of cattle startle, grazing in the grass. Roomy eyes see us onward, heaving past banks draped daintily in darker green. Radiata pine with chewed-up trim, interim toothpick piles onward to gap-tooth smiles from local boys, Lollipop men in roadworks crews, onward, cruising out to sea. That salt soup slushing flat, washing in at Cooper's Beach, where nighttime nudes, postcoitally subdued, can hear the dogged ache of foreign waves, collapsing without heed, for our cling film summer humidity stew, my heartbeat pulsing heat. And I know it's this hair. Greek boy statue ring of curls, cool in museum marble maybe, but not in Greece, and not here in the flesh. Dribbled sweat, double vision blur. Bronze boys in a sandstorm kaleidoscope, slick symmetry down the beach on a brace of boogie boards, styrofoam smack against the sea. Floating palaces, moon-moored chariots for suntan sultans, seen here in foam-sown ruffles, like the leaders of the first gasping heat of dusky demigods to reach us from some South American beach where our Chilean doubles, Pacific palindromes, spoon, innocent in the surf, wrapped tight like salty cocoons, then climb atop buoys for a westward squint to the scouts they sent to find us out here, alone but twin-hearted already, underwater and yet able to hear the plunging gurgles of the other. A single surge sends off the scene. The Grecian boatman tumbles, sand-scraped, jumbled, just a boy-child of crepe paper lungs, drugged by the heat in the midday sun, dragged under, deadly thunder inundating my ears, until I'm grabbed up and lugged onto the beach, a bit limp at first, limbs slack, neck flaccid, like the beached baby hammerheads this fishermen sometimes find here, staring down Pohudakawa pipe cleaners dusting the shore, inert with wide-eyed horror, only 2 meters short of the breathable sea that low-cut tidal tease, the ragged blue I now cough free, clumsy heat tarting up my cheeks as I lean into the numbness of a boy flecked with ocean grit and breathing still in squalls, beach towel drawn around our skinny boy's shoulders. A hero against the battering sea, he holds me to his chest despite the heat. So this one is set in Singapore. Night swim. Toward the end, we spend a lot of nights in the pool, a pocket empty of people in this crowded city. Here, your weight is not as weighty. You become part of the pale buoy of your mom's abdomen. Her vision, generally bad, is worse now she's pregnant, and I hide in the voids between orangey patches that bloom underwater as we play Marco Polo with eyes open and voices low. It's late, and the children in the apartments are asleep, but you slosh around, awake in the perfect darkness of your tiny inland sea. We swim languid laps, breathing every third stroke, while you stay submerged, no need for air in your lungs. You don't know yet that this is temporary. One day soon you'll have to get out of the water, dry off, shiver, and go home. Right, this one is called The First 100 Days. I wrote it in 2017. I want cash in hand, cheap burner phones, a full tank of gas in the car, detailed maps of the border, a meeting point on the other side. I want to make a plan now while no one's watching. But everyone says it's not time for that yet. You're being paranoid. My wife and I bathe the baby, tug a comb through his tangles. He lines up his yellow ducks, green monkey, purple hippo on the edge of the tub. In The Handmaid's Tale, it never says what happens to the Quaker family with a bathtub full of toys when Moira is captured. We eat chili on the couch, watching a sitcom from 2014. The writers didn't know they'd date the show by writing characters who aren't afraid. I can't sleep anymore. She curls around me and promises we won't wait too long, but I worry we've forgotten how to run. And I have 2 more. All right, this poem is about my second child, and it is called Neonatology. We call him Hugo Apollo, a science-fictional name perfect for the first space he inhabits after birth. A place out of time, where 2-pound babies, held close in their capsules, sleep in the beep and whoosh of machines. Wires and tubes tendril around him, sliding chemicals into his scalp and oxygen into his lungs. Electrodes stick to his chest, as though Houston is listening from afar, ready to radio in with a lullaby at the slightest blip. A waning crescent glows outside the hospital window, but his outer space begins 8 inches from his face, and the moon will have to wait. right, this one is called The Day the AP Called It. My older child calls me Dabo, so. Leggings streak hot pink against black afternoon trees. His sing-song carries back. Dabo, look, those squirrels are having a dance party. He twirls as needles rain down, fair curls floating around him, like a dandelion puff in the trembling seconds before. All of us have been holding our breath, reading red-blue checkerboard maps like tea leaves, refreshing Georgia. And now, my pocket vibrates every minute, celebratory memes bouncing through group texts. The country's in the streets, champagne running down the bright sides of cars, dancers spinning at the 76 station, rhythm thumping, shrieking, honking, lovers kissing through masks. In the woods, he curls into me on a bed of leaves. I'm Baby Bear, you're Dabo Bear, we're hibernating. The oak branches high above are a spider's web, he says, and the last quivering leaves are caught flies. What else is beautifuler in the forest? Chickadees erupt across the dusk and he cries, ooh, snuggling closer. Can we stay all night? We'll see stars. His body is soft, his dreams full of light. He's the beautifulest thing in the forest, and now he'll be safe here.
Wow. Yeah, I don't quite know what to say to start this off because that was just incredible. The imagery and the emotions. That was a roller coaster in 15 minutes. Like, that was incredible. I love poetry anyway. So I feel like I just got an abbreviated version of your life story.
You did. You just got a tour of my life.
In a very, God, what a beautiful format. I love poetry so much. Thank you. Thank you so much for reading those to us. I'm appreciative. I think people will really enjoy that too. So thank you.
Well, thanks.
Good way to start. So, Holly, let's talk about you a little bit. Where are you from?
I am from Southeast Michigan, suburban Detroit.
So, how did you end up here from there?
Oh, there were many stops. I went to college in Los Angeles at USC, and then I went on exchange for a year to New Zealand and ended up going back and staying for several years.
Cool.
And then one of the people that I'd had a gigantic teenage crush on, who's not the subject of my teenage crush bus poem, but a different person. We ended up getting married, and so I came back to the U.S. and was in the U.S. for a couple of years in Michigan, and then we went to Singapore for a few years, and then we ended up here. So there were many stops.
Yeah. Wow. Congrats. Happy story. Happy
I know.
love
It
story.
is, sometimes I read poems about her, and I do a whole sort of, I think it's, oh gosh, is it Jane Eyre that ends with "Reader, I married him"?
Oh,
Or not ends with, but there's a.
That sounds familiar.
Maybe I should know this. I am an English professor, which we're getting to. Maybe it might be Jane Austen. It might be one of hers. Anyway, but I when I do readings, I often am like, listener, I married her.
That's great. That's very, very sweet.
I wish I could say which classic novel that's from.
Someone will be thinking of it
Someone
right now
will
as
know.
they're listening.
Yes, and it's nice to know more than English professors. It makes you feel good. So I provide that opportunity.
Oh, wow. So what was it like in New Zealand? I hear amazing things.
It was wonderful. It was idyllic. I mean, there was all kinds of personal, early 20s sort of feelings. But in the background, there was just gorgeous landscapes and wonderful people and great chocolate. And
I've heard the people there's something about Australia and New Zealand where people are incredibly relaxed. Like when they say they're not working, they're serious about it.
I mean, I spent a lot of time just on beaches doing nothing and never feeling bad about it. Like in the States, I feel like you have to justify I'm taking me time or I'm taking a break from whatever the thing it is that I do. But when I was in New Zealand, I just was at the beach for days and that was fine. And no one seemed to wonder what I was supposed to be doing.
That's great.
So that was nice.
How was Singapore? It seems like it's changed a lot in the last 10 to 15 years where it's become very techy in
Singapore does have a really good tech scene, and also I think that it's not known for its literary scene, and so that was something that was a really welcome surprise for me. That there's local publishers and there's a lot of people who are also kind of pushing on the boundaries of what Singapore considers to be, I guess, appropriate social behavior. In my particular case, I'm queer, and that's not something that Singapore has traditionally been very excited about. But there are a lot of writers and other artists who are, saying we're going to write about this, we're going to have plays about this, and kind of daring Singapore to shut it down, which they often do in various ways, whether that's through funding or through other sorts of means. But I found it to be a really wonderful place to live in the sense that there was great food, friendly people. You could go, to lots of places that were very close. It was not hard to go to Bangkok or Bali or something like that. But it was also, in a lot of ways, a challenging place to live as a queer person.
Yeah, I'm sure, because that's kind of what I was thinking too. That they're not the first place I'm going to think of that's like queer friendly,
and quite different from someplace like New Zealand. Singapore is very productive, very work focused.
Right. You probably aren't going to hang around on the beach for a week.
I still may have been on the beach when people wondered why I was there.
Wow, that's fantastic. So you've led quite a life already.
So far.
Lots of stops. Fantastic. I love it. I really love your poetry. So what inspires you to write? It seems like you write a lot.
I would like to say that I write a lot. I haven't written a lot this pandemic. I have not written a lot. I know a lot of people are really focused on making sure that they're witnessing through writing everything that's going on. I feel like other people are covering that, and I'm going to, let it sort of compost in my mind and then later come back to all of this time. But what inspires me to write? Often, so most of what I just read you was fairly autobiographical, and I think what inspired me to write was that I wanted to get that on paper. I had various childhood things and whatever that I needed to kind of process. But I also do a fair amount of stuff that doesn't translate very well to audio. That's a little bit more experimental. That there really the inspiration is constraint and picking some sort of thing that I can't do or something that I have to follow.
Oh, right.
And that's, this is the same thing that I sort of give students exercises for because it gets you started.
That's what I was thinking, kind of like an exercise in pushing your own boundaries so that you can expand further. And poetry read is a very different thing. Poetry read verbally, I should say, versus in your own brain. Something about I think pentameter, is that the right word? The rhythm.
The meter?
Yeah, the meter.
Yeah.
I'm trying to read, because I used to write poetry and then I couldn't read it out loud the way I could hear it in my own head, which I never really came to any sort of conclusion on that. I never tried to read them out loud.
Well, even just reading is a really physical act. The one that I read, Boys on the Beach, that is 2 sentences. Though I think it reads it reads more than a page. And if I read it on the page, it can be very leisurely. But if I'm reading it out loud, it is a poem that ends with a person who's out of breath because they've had this sort of like, they've gone under in the riptide kind of thing. And when I read it, it captures that because I'm breathless by the end of reading. And I think I struggled with the last couple of lines there of, am I going to get it out? And that's the physicality of that is very different than if I'm just reading with my eyes in my head.
Right. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I guess I never really thought about that. Breaking a poem into sentence structure, it's probably very short.
Yeah, most poems are, people split across lines and there's all different ways to do it, but to read a poem that's just kind of that, it's sort of Whitman did this kind of like one thing after another, and you kind of like, it almost ends up having its own like waves of content that it propels itself forward. Right.
And the way you speak, it's like a run-on sentence. I always thought that was interesting, how poetry kind of transcends
grammar
in many ways, because English is very, strict. You aren't supposed to have run-on sentences.
No. I know, and even if it's grammatically correct, I'm not really supposed to have like 15 subordinate clauses. You're supposed to, keep it short and understandable, but that's not really what I'm always going for.
Right, yeah, it's an art form when you don't do that.
Mm-hmm. And I want it to be clear, but there's other effects that I can play with when I'm not constrained by sort of grammar.
Right. Oh, it's so cool. It's so cool to talk. I've talked to many musicians. I'm a musician myself. And honestly, I think my poetry when I was really young just kind of fell into the music scene. And I still find myself writing poems and then I convert them into songs. But it's interesting talking to you because you write poetry like so many people write music. It's really emotional. It's just the way you say it. It's not necessarily the words. It's the structure, it's the rhythm, there's so much to emotions and expressing them in different ways than just what's written on a page. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's fascinating. It's really interesting to draw these parallels between different people I've gotten to talk to. It's fantastic. So I want to ask you about UVM. You teach at UVM.
I do, yes.
So what do you teach?
I don't often teach creative writing, so that's sort of, it takes a different direction. I teach a bit of the kind of first year composition class that's sort of welcome to college. Here's how we write in college. And then I teach a lot of fantasy and science fiction. So I teach a climate change in science fiction and fantasy course, which is part of the sort of sustainability credit thing. So we talk a lot about climate change, and then we have these sort of cautionary tale novels that show, basically what happens if climate change gets out of control, but with a science fiction spin on it. And then I am currently in the fall, I'm going to be teaching for the second time a Harry Potter course.
Oh, cool.
So, I am a queer and non-binary person, so I do this with a lot of awareness of J.K. Rowling and the many opinions that she has.
Yes.
So the class also is aware of that and is very much, we have an assignment called WTF that is about problematic things in Harry Potter, but it's also, I'm not trying to ruin anything for anyone, but I think that sort of taking something that you passively absorbed as a child and like thinking about it consciously and critically is a really useful skill for living in America.
Yeah.
So,
oh yeah, definitely.
Harry Potter's a great place to start. So we can both appreciate it and enjoy the escapism of the story. And, she does a lot of things really well. And then we can also talk about where are the blind spots, where is the lack of representation, where is the kind of like cringy bits, and why.
Yeah, I feel like Harry Potter is one of these stories that got away from her in many ways because she came up with a story that at its base was very sweet and cute, and it wasn't gonna be what it became when she started. It became something so iconic and ridiculous that people compare life to Harry Potter, and in ways that sometimes, like you're pointing out, Harry Potter's not quite real life. There's a lot of stuff she left out of it. And I don't just mean the magic. I mean, obviously Hogwarts isn't real, but still, like you said, the representation. Because I think one of the things that stuck out to me when the movies came out, and I was a child, gosh, I'm trying to think of when, probably like 10 or 12 when they started coming out, maybe. And I always thought it was so weird. There was no black people in that movie. And then they just picked a kid and made him black, but he was never black in the books. And I remember thinking that was weird when I was so young. And now looking back, it's like, wow, there was no black people. There was nothing about, being gay. That wasn't even remotely on the radar.
That's what fan fiction's for.
Right. There really wasn't any sort of representation. There really wasn't. There's like magical representation.
She just tries to do a lot of stuff through metaphor, and some of it is done awkwardly because metaphor, if things don't always completely line up, and so you can be implying something you didn't mean to imply.
Yeah, and looking back now, I don't know what the hell she was talking about, which is funny because I'm like, I don't know who's the negative or is she talking about race? Is she talking about sexuality? Like, I don't know who the Muggles are supposed to be. I don't know who anyone is, but clearly there's like a repressed and then the controlling fascist type people. But I don't know what the hell she was really
you can take my class. We talk about all of this.
Yeah.
For a whole semester.
Because I feel like I could, if I really wanted to, I could kind of try and convince myself she was talking about any group that has been repressed, and I don't know who she was really trying to target. I don't know if she even really thought about it.
And some of it is why fiction often leaves those kinds of things open so the reader can read themselves into some of this stuff. But, you know, it would have been great to see a surface level queer character, to see, you know, racial and ethnic diversity beyond just like naming the twins, the Patel twins, you know, something that actually goes beyond that and isn't necessarily done through metaphor, but is done, you know, through people that readers can identify with in a more simple way. Right.
Yeah, because I don't really relate with werewolves, and I don't know who those are supposed to.
It's supposed to be a metaphor for HIV, which is
what?
If you think about it more, it makes it worse.
That's interesting.
The sort of,
poor Remus.
Poor Remus.
There's so many. See, we could talk about this for hours, probably. That's really fascinating, though. That's an interesting thing to think about. And I'm sure you must get, between the sci-fi course, like, what did you call it again? Sci-fi?
It's climate change and science fiction and fantasy.
Wow. So you must get incredible work from your students.
Oh, yes, definitely. The climate fiction class, I have them write like a short story where they have to kind of do what we've been reading all semester, and they turn in amazing stories. And the Harry Potter class is just, everyone's so excited to be there. It's like people have been waiting since childhood for somebody to ask them about Harry Potter, and they have opinions and they're ready to back them up, and they've done all of this like textual analysis without thinking about it as like a skill. And so I can say, oh, look, you've done close reading, and they're like, what?
Right.
And I'm like, no, you took this tiny sentence that you found and you made it into this whole thing, and you found this like backup, and so they're sort of exercising all these skills that we want them to be doing without feeling like it's a chore. So that's one of my favorite things about teaching Harry Potter, is just like the students are so excited.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Because when I think I was in 6th grade, they said no more Harry Potter. We weren't allowed to read it. Mm-hmm. We could read it, but we couldn't talk about it in English. So I imagine that just kind of carried through. I'm sure the school I went to in the middle of nowhere probably still doesn't let kids do Harry Potter book reports, which to me, that just screams some weird fascist. When I was a child, I'm like, we're being repressed.
My Catholic school, we had someone we did read Harry Potter. We had a sort of rebel teacher who had us read Harry Potter, but we also had the teacher who was pretty sure that it was satanic and we should ban it and burn it or whatever. And he had a lot of feelings about that.
I find stuff like that hilarious.
It was pretty silly, because at the end of the day, like, this is no more satanic than was, Narnia, which was Christian allegory, and there ended up being a lot of Christian allegorical symbols in Harry Potter, but he didn't read far enough for that. He was just
right. It's just magic, and magic's bad.
Magic's bad, and these kids, they're breaking the rules, and they're setting a bad example
of the devil. Yeah, I've never quite followed that line of thinking, but I mean, usually if you think Harry Potter's of the devil, you think most things are of the devil.
We're probably not going to get on if that's your take on Harry Potter.
Right.
We probably don't need to pursue it any further.
Oh, okay, so tell me about you have 2 different books coming out very soon.
I do, next year, hopefully. I mean, the small press world is always one where we hope and pray for their continued survival. But I have one coming out in the States, which is mostly autobiographical stuff, and it's a lot of the things that I just read will be in that collection. It's going to be, right now the title is The Pressure of All That Light, but of course that may change. And then the other one is being published by a publisher in London, but there will be a US edition, and that one is called At Last We Listen Closely, Cryptic Crossword Poems. So cool. I have invented a new form of poetry that's based on cryptic crossword poems, cryptic crosswords, which is the sort of British-style crossword. In the States, we have a particular kind of crossword where the clues are often definitions or point you toward a particular pop culture answer or place or something that's like, they're called straight clues. And in cryptic style crosswords, each clue has a part that is wordplay and a part that is a definition or a straight clue.
Oh.
So the title is At Last We Listen Closely. And we listen signals a sound alike. And so the answer to that as a clue is finally, because at last means finally. So that's the straight clue. And then we listen tells you that the next word coming up is going to be, you should find a word that it means a word that sounds like the thing you're looking for. So finally, like with a fine tooth comb, like finally,
wow,
closely.
This is interesting. I've never heard of this.
So that was probably not a great one to choose to explain, but there's all these different ways of doing wordplay, and they've been sort of codified because people have been writing this for a long time, writing this kind of crossword. And I always thought, I did a lot of these in New Zealand, and I always thought that they sounded like poetry, because there would be these sort of phrases that had nothing to do with the answer. They were a wordplay, and they're just supposed to kind of throw you off. And so they could be written in all kinds of different ways. And so I wrote a collection where each poem has two parts. There's the clues section, which is itself a poem. Like, it stands alone as a poem. You could read it as a poem. And then there's a haiku, which is the answers, and that could stand alone as a poem, but each line in the clues gives you a word in the haiku, and so they're basically like two interlocking poems.
Very cool.
Which is why I didn't read any of them, because they don't really make sense as audio. They make sense as poems. They do, and the two parts sort of comment on each other as well.
Right. But we'd kind of missed the clever.
You've missed how clever I am, so I wasn't going to waste it. So I wrote a lot of those when my first kid was born in Singapore. I took the year off and hung out with him, and I found that I couldn't really write any poetry. I was much too tired. But I could, in these sort of moments of, trying to get him to eat something, trying to get him to sleep, kind of just, blah brain moments, I could start to come up with these clues. And then as soon as he was like, he was asleep, I'd go and write down my clues. I'd add it to my word file of clues. And then once I had enough clues, I started kind of putting them together. And so I finally, he's now 6, finally publishing this book of these cryptic crossword poems.
Yeah, that's great. That sounds so cool. I need to look up some of these crosswords, because they sound insanely British, because British people have this sort of cheeky, clever, their humor isn't always so straightforward. Americans have very blah humor in some ways.
Americans enjoy a good dad joke and a good fart joke. That's really where we are in terms of the humor world.
Right in your face, like right here.
Although sometimes dad jokes are heading toward.
Sometimes they can be pretty clever.
There's a little bit of punning. But yeah, so if you could, I have some of these have been published, and there's you could put some links or something.
Yeah, definitely.
Have a look.
We will definitely have links to all of your work on the show notes.
So you all can go in, and if you cover up the answers, you can try and figure out, by the clues. You could. I mean, it's in interactive poetry form.
Yeah, that's cool.
It's very niche. It's people who enjoy poetry who also enjoy cryptic crosswords, which is like 4 people.
I feel like people in America don't know these things exist, and a lot of people would actually really like them if we knew.
They're really fun. I think that a lot of people I know would really enjoy cryptic crosswords.
Yeah, this is great. So this is awesome that you wrote this book, because now you can start putting it places and hopefully reach these people who will find it interesting.
I hope so.
I think Vermont is full of people who would love that kind of thing.
That is true. That is true. Vermont can rise above the fart joke and move toward,
there's a lot of really intelligent people in this area, and just people who love that kind of, it's just clever. I don't know how to explain it.
Nerdiness.
Yeah, I guess.
We're word nerds.
See, I feel like the word nerd has been taken over by like Star Wars, and
that's why we're word nerds. It's got a rhyme. It's specific enough.
Wow, this is blowing my mind. I'm very interested in this book. I'm excited to check that one out. So let's talk about My Pet Sounds Off, translating the Beach Boys, because this also sounded awesome.
So this was actually a bit of a joke that I did, but I ended up publishing this as a chapbook. I have a friend, his name is Paul Legault. He's also a poet, and he was the subject of the poem about going to San Francisco when we because we went to college together, and we kind of like the first month that we were there, we're like, I've got something to tell you. I've got something to tell you. Oh, I'm gay. We're both gay. So anyway, so we took this trip to San Francisco. It was not a surprise in retrospect, but anyway, so he has done a number of really cool books where he does English to English translations of Shakespeare, Emily Dickinson, Hart Crane, different poets. But they're like serious poets, and they've written something serious. And often what he writes is very funny, but he's starting with a very serious kind of like source text. And so, I don't know, 7 or 8 years ago, I was like, what if we took something dumb, something that's just a bit silly to start with, and did translations of that? And so I took the Beach Boys, because actually, I mean, I say dumb, but everybody kind of loves the Beach Boys. It's like the soundtrack of summer. And everywhere you go, in your supermarket, creamy stand, like there's gonna be the Beach Boys. They're gonna be playing.
Yeah, they're still playing.
It turns out that you like know like 10 Beach Boys songs more than you thought you knew. They're everywhere. So I was like, what if we start with the Beach Boys and I sort of translate them and kind of, I mean, it's kind of satire, but also like a little bit more poetic satire, and kind of a commentary on, you know, what the Beach Boys weren't, which is, I mean, like, some of their stuff is kind of sexist, some of their stuff is kind of creepy, like, some of it's not great, but, and some of it's just silly, like, and so I just had a really good time with it, and, ended up publishing that as a chapbook. It came out, kind of May 2020, so it didn't really come out in any sense. It was sort of like I got a box of books and I was like, okay, well, now it's published. But because there wasn't much going on.
Right, you couldn't really have a launch party or anything.
No, I was going to have one at the beach
one.
too. I was going to do a big beach
launch party.
Right,
with the Beach Boys playing.
But I did a Zoom party. I had, my friends came to my Zoom party.
You can do an anniversary party maybe.
Yeah, maybe I'll do it.
Might be fun.
But
it sounds just amazing. I really want to check that one out because there's a lot of wonky Beach Boys songs, because that's just the era that it was. And they hit that niche with the surf rock, but that wasn't all their music. Like,
no, they had a lot of stuff. There were many girls they wanted to get with, and they had songs about many of them. They had many cars they wanted to drive, and they had songs about those as well.
I think of, I hope I don't make anyone upset, but when I think of the Beach Boys, it's like white 50s America from the male perspective of a white man in the 50s who's a good-looking guy with everything going for him, which is why it's so happy and like it's great if it emits this amazingly positive emotion.
Yeah, it's I mean, you've got that real barbershop quartet feel to it, but with more sand.
Yeah. Oh,
but certainly a very narrow slice of Americana.
Yes.
That somehow has become ubiquitously played no matter where you go.
Right. It makes sense, because that's when you think of what Make America Great was talking about. They were talking about the Beach Boys. They were talking about
Mike Love.
They're talking about white America in the suburbs listening to the Beach Boys in the 50s. That's what they're talking about. And that's a really specific...
It's a really specific America.
Yeah, that's a very specific America, and even for white people today, that America's gone.
Yeah.
You can be white and straight and a dude, and today it's not peachy, surfing the waves, fun times.
And you're not gonna pick anybody up with these lines. They're not good. Nobody's gonna like, the vibe of a lot of them is sort of like, you were better looking when you were younger kind of thing. Or like,
that sounds about right.
Why don't you want to get with me?
Obviously, I'm a beach boy.
Yeah, but anyway, I had a lot of fun writing these sort of kind of parodies, but poetic parodies. Kind of, I don't know, sending up the Beach Boys.
Oh man, you have so many books. How many books have you actually published?
I've published 2, and then I've got two forthcoming.
Okay, all right. So we've talked about. No, we haven't talked about excerpts from a natural history.
We haven't talked about excerpts from a natural history.
Let's talk about that.
Okay, let's do it. I feel like we're going like backwards in time. But,
we are. That's okay sometimes.
Okay, so excerpts from natural history. This is gonna get nerdy again. So, the natural philosophers, which is people like Francis Bacon and John Locke, Robert Boyle, they. I'm gonna butcher this. Okay, so preparing. They kind kind of were the founders of natural history. And I had, when I was living in New Zealand, my ex was taking a philosophy class with a professor who was really excited about John Locke, not as a political philosopher, which is what he's mostly known for, but as a natural philosopher. And so he was teaching them all about sort of his theories of natural philosophy and how he wanted people to stop making theories about the world and just go get like empirical like evidence. And he was like, once we have all the evidence in, then we can make a theory about things, but we shouldn't just be like making theories with partial evidence. So like, let's go get all the stuff. Which on the face of it is ridiculous because there's so much to get. Like he was not aware of the existence of Wikipedia, but like I feel like if he could glimpse the future, he would know that this was like a losing battle. Because they're just like infinite stuff. But at one point, somebody in this circle sort of proposed like, and they didn't all know each other. They were kind of like the way that people can be founding fathers without actually being interacting. But somebody in this circle was like, we should get a poet to do a poetic sort of encyclopedia of the world. And this never happened. But so I heard about this from my then partner, and I was like, I'm gonna write one. I'm gonna write like a little poetic encyclopedia. And so I wrote, like 10 or 12 pages and gave them to my partner to hand off to this professor, just be like, haha, I wrote this thing. And he was like, you wildly misunderstood this. And I was like, awesome. Okay, cool. So I put it aside because it was just a joke. It was just for fun.
I really want to know what he was expecting.
I mean, I probably, if he heard what I just described as the like founding of natural history, he would say that I had wildly misunderstood all of it.
Well, too bad for him.
It's poetry, so I do what I want. But so he said I wildly misunderstood it, and I sort of put it aside for many years, and then I don't know, like 5 or 6 years later, I came back to it. I found it on my computer, and I was like, you know what? I'm gonna make a book. I'm gonna make a whole book of this. So I did. I went. So the whole thing it's these poetic kind of entries on everything, because natural history at this point was actually not conceived of exclusively as being the natural world of like flora, fauna, rocks kind of thing, but like everything that happens, because we are also animals. So everything we've made is also part of natural history. So like
right.
The buttons on your coat are part of natural history. Like everything is. So this book is like that, but it's also, I made it an ill-fated love story between the poet researcher and the editor. And because part of the joke is that this could never end, it's like 300 years later, it's now in the present, and this is still going as though it's been going. It's become like a multinational corporation now. Nice. And there's like an editor, and they're like falling in love with the writer, and they're having this like marginal conversation in the margins of this book, while also finding all the facts in the world.
This sounds amazing. I love that you very cheekily turned this into a book after you didn't understand.
It didn't put me off at all.
That is amazing.
It really didn't. I thought about sending him a copy once it was like a real published book. I was tempted, but I didn't.
Oh, you should.
I didn't. Again, I just want to put like a disclaimer that you should actually read about natural history, not from me, and find out how it was founded, because like that might not be real.
Right.
I may have misunderstood that.
That was amazing.
Wildly.
And that sounds exactly what I would think of when someone described an encyclopedia of natural history, but written in poetry. That sounds like what you did to me, but you kind of took a spin on it.
Yeah.
With the little romance.
A little romance and a little, I don't know. I wanted to make it get weird. Like I thought that people would get bored with just, here, this one's going to be about flowers, and this one's going to be about freeways, and this one's going to be about whatever. But if you also have these people who are like passive aggressively sniping at each other through poetry, I thought that could be more, more amusing.
Yeah, definitely. It sounds really funny. Hopefully you're going for funny. I'm not laughing at your work.
I'm definitely going for funny.
That's great. I really want you to send a copy of that book.
I don't know where he is now. He's no longer at that university, so I might not be able to find him.
Oh, man. Hey, I wrote the book you wanted.
He might be off compiling his own poetic encyclopedia. Maybe he felt he got scooped by me.
Oh, man. Well, I really hope that it's listed as an encyclopedia of natural history.
I don't think it is. But people do think it's a textbook when they're like, oh, excerpts from natural history. Like, they'll ask me if it's some kind of text, and I'm like, no.
That does make sense.
You should open it. You should open it.
Oh, that's great. Okay, so I think, is this the last one? The Obsolete Jobs Project?
Yeah, so that's not published, and that one has no publisher. So if you're listening, publishers, I'm here. But that one, so when I was living in Singapore, my wife and I had a conversation about how no one really makes a living as a poet, and I don't know that people ever really did. Like maybe a few like scattered court poets or something. But really, it's not. It can't be your only job. And I was sort of like, you know what? There's all kinds of people with jobs that are obsolete that, maybe at one point did support people, but now, there's not really a demand for those jobs anymore. But there are still people doing those jobs. And I was like, I'm going to go find those people. So, starting from that, kind of silly starting point, I actually ended up, deep in the Bureau of Labor Statistics, like projections and data on jobs over the last, hundreds of years. And there's different timescales. You can think of like a blacksmith that has millennia as a timescale versus something like a video store clerk, which had about, 30 years of being relevant.
Right.
And so I found, I made a list of all these jobs that you don't see much of anymore. And then I went and found people. And so I've taken a number of trips, but I've driven all over sort of the eastern half of the U.S. I've been to 22 states and interviewed 55 people.
Cool.
And photographed them as well. And so now it's kind of become like an oral history project.
Definitely. If you're talking to people whose jobs are literally dying.
Yeah. So so I've got everything from telephone operator to milkman to as I said, blacksmith, video store clerk, shoe shiner.
Leather workers would be a good one.
Which ones are?
Leather workers.
Leather workers. Yeah. Yep. And so I've just been driving around and talking to people, which is fantastic. And really kind of learned a lot. Because I think I had the expectation that I had the expectation that there would be a lot of old men who are nearing retirement, who kind of like hung on and were just kind of like cruising until they personally were retiring.
Right.
But I met a lot of young people who were, kind of coming up in professions that, I met a milkman in Asheville, North Carolina, and
cool.
he said, I think this could be part of the sort of slow foods movement. This is about knowing your farmer. This is about, having a personal connection with your food. So I don't think this is obsolete just because people have refrigerators now and don't need daily delivery of milk in the way that once they did.
Right. I can see. Yeah, I could totally agree with that. That makes a lot of sense. And it's true for things like blacksmiths, too. Mm-hmm. I was thinking that there are none left, but if you are a blacksmith, I know there's one in Vermont. I think he's in Highgate or Swanton. He makes cast iron gates for people, and I think he's in extremely high demand because no one makes
Being the last
anymore.
One standing, I found can be quite a good position for some of the people. So talking to people about, what is it that made your job be more obsolete? Was it technology? Was it trade or outsourcing? Was it just a change in taste, something like a hat maker? People used to, everybody wore hats, and now they don't. Tobacconists, we've changed the laws to make it such that, like, smoking indoors is a lot less prevalent. So being a tobacconist, like, just, the rates of smoking have gone down. So there have been all these societal changes alongside technological and trade changes that have made that all interact together. I've been working on that for 7 or 8 years, and I don't know if the end is in sight, but I have done a lot of interviews. I want to do the West. I'd hoped to do the West last summer, but of course nobody went anywhere.
Right. Yeah.
But it is a little, things are further apart, so it's a bit harder to just like take a road trip the way that you can around New England and just like hit a bunch of towns.
Yeah, it takes a lot longer.
Yeah. So, but I'm still hoping to do that sometime in the next year. And I taught a course at UVM that was sort of about this, and sent students out into Vermont who, not specifically about obsolete jobs, but jobs in general. So I had students who were interviewing people all around Chittenden County and beyond in some cases, as they had transportation to do so.
Very cool.
And just talking to them. And I think it was a really good experience for students because I think we have this attitude, which is partially driven by insane student debt, which is totally reasonable, and I don't want to downplay that, but the idea that like you have to know what you're doing as soon as you get out of college, or out of high school in some cases, that you've got to be on a path, and if you stray from the path, then I think in some cases even there's sort of like that's morally suspect, not just like financially irresponsible, but and then there's this so much pressure and anxiety, and so talking to people who didn't necessarily do that, because it's actually pretty common to change jobs or like have something happen in your 20s that puts you on a different path than you were on in college.
I think I would argue almost more people.
It was,
And I think a lot of people who end up stuck at what they picked when they were 18 end up incredibly unhappy in their 40s because they never got to do anything else. And I think it's a little criminal, honestly, what we do to our kids, because when you're 18, your brain's not developed. You're a child. You don't know.
You're not really ready to pick.
You're not ready to decide what you're going to do for the rest of your life. And you shouldn't be forced into it. And I don't think that we do a great job of giving kids options because that's it. You have to. You have to make money.
Well, you've got the student debt burden for most students that they need to, have. And I was lucky not to have that because I was on scholarship. So I got to graduate and kind of like play around with different things for a while. And that was really good for me. And so without minimizing or trivializing students' anxiety around like very large sums of money, that I want them to feel that like it's actually really common. And I think that this class was good for that. And, we paired up with the Career Center a little bit to
nice.
get them into those sorts of networks and thinking about what this can mean for themselves, but also to be like, it's okay if you don't know. It's okay if you change your mind.
Right.
There's lots of time to do that still.
Yeah, that's a lot of like, it's a self-perpetuating cycle because most kids, and it's valid in a big way because college is so important, like that time in life, like being around other people, new ideas, communicating, just the social aspect of that, growing up. And acceptance. I feel like people who go to college learn a lot more acceptance because they're exposed to new ideas and different people. And hey, it's not the same rednecks I was stuck in a tiny town with my whole life. There are really different ideas out here and like different ways to live and be. So I find college incredibly important, but at the same time, the second you agree to college, you've got to pay for it. So it really takes away from the other half of that learning, which is doing, like go and do things and experience things versus just like go to college, pick a thing, get the degree, go do the thing, which is, we just really beat that into our kids' heads in many ways. I wish that things like blacksmiths had places that you could go and learn how to be a blacksmith and have it be, there's a lot of like kitschy things, have it be like a real life lesson, versus, hey, look, I made this one thing, and that was all I ever knew about blacksmithing, and it's not like a real career option presented to them. It's more like a hobby, which it would be nice if we were a little more accepting.
Well, and I mean, even like this, a lot of skilled trades can provide a really good income and lifestyle for people, but we have this narrative, I say as a college professor, that everybody has to go to college, and if you don't go to college, and you're, and that's not true, and we didn't, like, it doesn't have to be that way.
Right. And it wasn't, and I blame the government. I'm gonna go there. I'm gonna blame the government because they did. They put ads in the 90s that said, that had pictures of old men who were janitors and said, you don't want to end up like him. Like,
Which is offensive in so many ways.
So offensive in so many ways, and people could be grocers 3 decades ago and feed their whole family and have children and have a real life working at a grocery store. And there was a serious skill in that, and it's been totally lost. Like, people, they knew how to cook. You'd ask them how to cook, and they'd tell you, oh, try this as a side, and try this as your meat. And, like, they'd really talk to you versus the poor kids at the grocery store now. They're like, I'm just stocking this shelf. Leave me alone. That's it. That's what they're paid to do. I don't expect them to be a grocer like what a person would do 30 years ago and actually feed their kids on it.
Yeah, so. and a lot of this is the kind of, everything's become bigger. Everything's become, a supermarket or big box store. And so we don't have those sort of smaller careers and trades that would have once been split off into, they've all been sucked into a Walmart.
Yeah. Oh, definitely. And just that loss of personal connection, because I have so many neighbors, and I don't know any of my neighbors. I know like a handful of them because they literally work with me. But that's it. There's a lots of personal connection. But anyway, we're going off on a really random tangent.
We've gone, yeah.
Sorry about that.
Anyway, jobs. I interview people about them.
That's 55 interviews is really impressive. That's because I know how much time and effort putting an interview together is. So that's kudos to you. And that sounds like a fantastic project just for America in general and the whole world. Like, hey, these jobs aren't dead yet, guys.
Yeah, and some of them are really cool. And I usually photograph people in their workplaces.
Nice.
So I get to go into all kinds of cool workplaces and, learn how to do this or that thing. And bookbinders, like, let me help them make a book. I didn't do much, but like I got to choose things. Then they made a book in front of me. Or the blacksmith let me hit some things for a while. And I feel like I got to really see a lot of spaces that I wouldn't normally.
Right. And people in their natural environment like that, and they're so excited to show it off,
and
too.
It's really cool to see people do stuff that they're proud of and they're good at. Like, seeing somebody do something that they can do masterfully is just...
Especially physical stuff. Because I write code, and it's very not exciting
it's
to
true.
watch.
Watching somebody write code, it doesn't have that same feeling.
You could be the greatest coder in the world. You could be...
I mean, did you think about how movies have to try and make that look really exciting? Like,
Hacker Man.
So they've got this music going in the background, the lights are always really low.
And there's always, for some reason, it's always a black screen with green numbers just scrolling.
Because if they actually,
right.
made a film about people actually coding, then...
It would be much less exciting.
It would be.
Than Hacker Man. I always loved Hacker Man. Okay. Well, Holly, thank you so much for coming on this show. I really appreciated your poetry, and I'm very excited about all of your books. Check out the show notes page. I'll spiel Holly's website in a second here, but thank you so much for coming.
Thanks, Peg.
Thank you so much for listening to the end of the episode, and thank you to Holly for coming on the show. You can find the show notes for this episode at vermonttalks.com/27. Check out Holly's website at hollypainter, HOLLYPAINTER.com. Don't forget to subscribe to the show on your favorite podcasting platform, and have a great day. That's what was new in the 802. The Vermont Talks show music was created by Jason Baker. Thank you so much, Jason, for making the music. You can check out his website at jbakervt.com.